Imagine a book so mysterious even the Bible didn't include it. The Book of Enoch reveals a tale of the Watchers, angels who defied God, took human wives and birthed the Nephilim, giants who wreaked havoc on earth. This forbidden knowledge led to chaos and destruction. So, why was it removed from the Bible? Dive into the secrets of the Watchers, the Nephilim, and the reasons this book remains hidden. The Book of Enoch, while containing valuable insights, was not included in the Bible primarily because it was not considered authoritative scripture by most Jewish and Christian communities, and it contained teachings inconsistent with the established canon. If you're intrigued, hit like, share, and subscribe. Let's uncover the mystery together. The Book of Enoch describes the Watchers, angels who disobeyed God by mating with human women and teaching forbidden knowledge. These actions resulted in the birth of the Nephilim, giants that caused violence and destruction on earth. The Book of Enoch, about the fallen Watchers, the human women, the bloodthirsty giants. Should Christians read it since Jude's book quotes it? Why is it not included in the Bible as part of the canon? Who wrote this book, and what is this book all about? In this video, we're going to take a deeper look into the Book of Enoch. It's a mysterious book, and it has gained a lot of attraction lately, not just among Christians, but also among those who are into New Age and other religions. So first and foremost, what is this? The Book of Enoch is an ancient book with 5 separate parts by different authors, plus segments from the Book of Noah thrown in there for good measure. Who wrote this book? Actually, nobody knows who wrote this book. The authorship of the Book of Enoch, like many other ancient books, is not very clear. It is attributed to Enoch, the great-grandfather of Noah, but it was not actually written by him. Enoch is considered a legendary figure, and the attribution to him is part of this work that's called Pseudepigrapha. It's the writings of people that are actually not true writers of these works, meaning that the true authors used his name to give the extra aura of ancient wisdom and authority. But Enoch actually never wrote this book. The Book of Enoch was most likely written by multiple authors over several centuries, estimates ranging from 3rd century BC to 1 century AD. This period of time is known as the Second Temple period in Jewish history. It's a time where there was a lot of religious writing and thought outside of the Hebrew Bible. Now, what is the Book of Enoch all about? Let me break down the 5 parts of this book. The first book is the Book of the Watchers. It's Enoch 1 through 36. Now, this section tells about the fallen angels who are called the Watchers, who descend to the earth and marry human women, resulting in the birth of hybrid giants known as the Nephilim. You probably have heard a similar story in the book of Genesis. Enoch is the righteous man chosen by God to receive wisdom and knowledge. He's shown the secrets of the universe, including the workings of the heavens, and acts as this intercessor in between heaven and the earth. The Watchers asked Enoch to intercede on their behalf before God, but they are denied forgiveness and are bound and cast into the abyss as the punishment for their action. So that's the first book, 36 chapters. Now the second book is the Book of the Parables, 1 Enoch 37 through 71. This section contains 3 parables that deal with the themes of divine judgment and the coming Messiah kingdom. It introduces the concept of the Son of Man, a heavenly figure that will judge the wicked and establish a righteous kingdom. This term is later used actually in the New Testament in reference to Christ. Now the third book of Enoch is the book of the heavenly luminaries, 1 Enoch 72 till 82. Here, Enoch is given knowledge about the movements of the heavenly bodies, the sun, moon, and the stars, suggesting a particular interest in astronomy and its connection to the divine order. It describes a solar calendar that is different from the lunar calendar used by the Hebrews at the time. The next book of Enoch is the Book of Dreams and Visions, 1 Enoch 82 till 90. Enoch has 2 visions. The first one is about the Great Flood, and the second one is about the history of Israel, symbolically represented by animals. These visions, they recount the history of the world from the time of Adam to the establishment of the Messianic kingdom. And now the last book of Enoch is the book of the Epistle of Enoch, 1 Enoch 81 until 108. This final section includes the series of encouragements to the righteous and the warnings to the sinners, revelations about the future including the resurrection and the final judgment. It ends with an appendix that reaffirms the judgment and the importance to living in righteousness. So now these are the 5 books of Enoch within one Enoch. The one that has a lot of interest and probably where you've heard different references to is the first book that I've highlighted, is the Book of the Watchers. Now I'm going to break down the Book of the Watchers just a little bit more, so that you will know kind of where some of these ideas are coming from. The Book of the Watchers, which is the first book of Enoch, which has 36 chapters. That book, I'm going to break it down a little bit more into the descent of the Watchers, chapters 1-5, and that's when Enoch starts with a warning about the great judgment against the Watchers, a group of angels who have sinned. These angels see the earth's women as beautiful. So they decide to leave their heavenly home to marry them. This, of course, is forbidden, and their actions start causing problems on the earth. And then if you go a little bit down, chapter 6:16, you will see the sins of the Watchers and the Nephilim. The angels now on earth teach humans various hidden knowledge and crafts which lead to warfare, sorcery, and all other sins. Now this angel and human union produced this hybrid offspring called Nephilims, who are the giants that bring pretty much havoc on this earth and actually consume the humans alive, leading to widespread despair, and chapters 17 through 36. Enoch's mediation and the judgment of the Watchers, chapters 17-36, talk about Enoch's mediation and the judgment on the Watchers. The Watchers realize that they have done wrong, and they ask Enoch to speak to God on their behalf, hoping for forgiveness. Enoch ascends to the heavens where he receives visions and is told about the natural order and why the Watchers cannot be forgiven. God declares that the Watchers must be bound and imprisoned in the earth, and their giant children must be eliminated, and the judgment is carried out, and Enoch is given more revelation about the workings of the cosmos. You probably have heard this, especially in reference in the book of Genesis about the sons of God, sleeping with the daughters of men, and then this hybrid offspring is being produced, and then the flood comes in to wipe out the hybrid offspring, and there's a lot of debate on that. There are some people saying that they were just the descendants of Cain. I lean more toward the fact that they were actually angels who have rebelled against God and who have violated their domain and have created hybrid descendants or hybrid humans that were devouring people, and then God had to wipe them out. But this actual idea is also supported in the Book of Enoch. That's not why I lean toward that idea, because it's supported in the Book of Enoch, but it seems to make most sense in concerning the explanation of Genesis chapter 6, and I have other videos that deal with that we will link below. Now, why was the Book of Enoch not included in the Bible? Now, the term Pseudepigrapha refers to the collection. What does Pseudepigrapha mean of ancient books? Written from about 200 BC to about 200 AD, and they're not considered part of the canon by most Jewish and Christian traditions. The word pseudepigrapha actually comes from Greek words meaning false and to write, indicating that the works are falsely attributed to authors who did not actually write them. So that kind of tells you right away why it's not in the Bible. It's part of the collection of these books that are falsely being attributed to different people who didn't write them, and the Bible is the book of truth, and so that right away should be a red flag. Why it shouldn't be in the Bible, let them tell it. Matthew's book made it in the Bible, but Matthew didn't write Matthew. Go read Matthew chapter 9, verse 9. And as Jesus passed forth from thence, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the receipt of custom. And he saith unto him, Follow me. And he arose and followed him. You will figure it out later. Now these texts often bear the names of biblical characters, but they were not written by them or within their lifetime. The Book of Enoch is not included in the Jewish or Christian scriptures, with an exception actually of Ethiopian Orthodox Church, which regards the Book of Enoch as part of the canon, as part of the scriptures, but the Jewish and the Christian scriptures do not have it. Now Jude actually quotes the first of Enoch. Jude 1:14, Jude quotes the Book of Enoch, and 15 says, Now Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied about these men also, saying, Behold, the Lord comes with 10,000s of his saints to execute judgment on all, to convict all who are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds which they have committed in an ungodly way, and of all the harsh things which ungodly sinners have spoken against him." Now, it actually quotes from 1 Enoch 1:9. I'm going to read it to you straight from 1 Enoch, and behold, he cometh with tens of thousands of his holy ones to execute judgment upon all, and to destroy all the ungodly, and to convict all flesh of all the works of their ungodliness, which they have ungodly committed, and of all the hard things which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. So, Jude quotes from Enoch, but it does not mean that all of the Book of Enoch is inspired. Paul quotes a pagan philosopher in Titus 1:12, but it doesn't mean that everything that this philosopher wrote is the Holy Scripture. No scholar believes that the Book of Enoch was truly written by Enoch. The truth is that there is another level to this when you start getting into the doctrine of the Anunnaki, who are the Elohim of the Bible. So just because Jude quotes a portion of Enoch does not mean that Jude thought that the entire Book of Enoch was valid or that it was Scripture. Finally, what should Christians do about this mysterious Book of the Enoch? It does provide insights into the beliefs and culture and religious understanding of this period between the Old Testament and the New Testament. Also, it gives us some understanding about the Second Temple Judaism. It's important to understand the Second Temple Judaism because it was this forming period for both Judaism and Christianity. We also see that the themes that are in Enoch, they do appear in New Testament passages. Not only the reference of Jude, but also even this idea of judgment, the coming of the Messiah. These themes are in the New Testament, as well as it has apocalyptic genre. And the prime example of this apocalyptic literature, we see visions, angelic things. We see the end of the world scenarios, which is present both in Daniel and in Revelation. We should treat the Book of Enoch and all other books in the same manner that we treat all other books that we call Apocrypha. And I have a whole video about that, which some things they say are true and correct, but much of it is historically inaccurate from a Western Christian perspective. Apocrypha books are interesting if you're deep. They're fascinating, but they're not accurate from a Western Christian perspective. They are not inspired by God, and they're not part of the Scripture from a Western Christian perspective. Pastor Joe Blow said this about the Book of Enoch just because he doesn't want to lose no people, and that Sunday plate collection. What should good Christians do about this mysterious book of the first Enoch? Some people say New Agers and some people who practice occult use the particular book. Just because the Romans didn't accept it does not mean that the Book of Enoch itself is bad. Bad people use the Bible, but we don't throw it out, and he would say that they use Enoch in its own context. The Second Temple period, not in the context of aliens, meaning you can read it. What you have to understand is that a lot of the stuff in the Book of Enoch is extraterrestrial, and the church can't go for that. But on the other hand, they will tell you about angels, and the whole idea that it's written by Enoch is also not true, and so you have to use wisdom, and it's not part of the Bible from a Christian perspective. It's not part of canon. It's because mainstream Christians were trying to reject mysterious information and anything that may make you question the Pope. So if you've never read the book, read it. Why did God hid the knowledge shared by the fallen angels? What if I told you there exists a story so controversial, so forbidden, that it was left out of most Bibles, a story of powerful celestial beings known as the Watchers Angels, who descended to earth and shared forbidden knowledge with humanity, altering the course of our existence forever? But here's the mystery. Why did God forbid this knowledge in the first place? Was it God or man who forbid them? Why were these secrets, so alluring yet so dangerous, kept hidden from us in the Book of Enoch, an ancient text preserved in the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition? We find a narrative that answers these questions. The Watchers imparted knowledge that would give humanity power over nature, technology, and even each other, but at a price, one that would bring corruption, chaos, and destruction. In today's episode of Deep Bible Story, we'll uncover what this forbidden knowledge was, explore why God withheld it, and discover how the actions of these fallen angels changed humanity's path. Were these secrets withheld to protect us? Or was there something far deeper at stake? If you're intrigued by the mysteries of ancient texts and the forbidden knowledge they contain, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Young Elders channel. Together, let's dive into the hidden story of the Watchers and the forbidden knowledge that the descent of the Watchers reshaped the fate of humanity in the Book of Enoch. We are introduced to a group of angels called the Watchers, powerful beings tasked with observing and guiding humanity. But these angels did far more than just watch. Led by Sajadza, a faction of the Watchers made a fateful decision. For advanced student, another name for these Watchers is the Agigi in the Anunnaki doctrine. They descended to Earth with a plan that would forever alter human history, driven by desire and defiance. They took human wives, crossing boundaries that God had set to protect both humans and angels. This act was just the beginning. As they integrated themselves into human lives, these fallen angels began to share knowledge, powerful secrets of the universe and nature. But here lies the question: what were these forbidden teachings, and why were they so dangerous? The Book of Enoch lists these teachings in detail. The Watchers shared skills in metalworking and weapon making, which allowed humanity to create tools of war and destruction. They taught the secrets of enchantments and magic. Revealing ways to manipulate the natural and supernatural realms, they introduced humanity to astrology, revealing secrets of the stars that were meant to remain hidden. Each teaching, though seemingly beneficial, opened doors to powers and forces that humans were never meant to control. Each piece of knowledge on its own seemed harmless or even helpful. But taken together, these teachings became tools of corruption. Humans who once lived in simplicity and dependence on God now had the means to dominate, deceive, and destroy. And with this knowledge came arrogance, a belief that humanity could rival divine wisdom and live without God's guidance. In Genesis 6:5, we find an echo of this corruption. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil. All the time, the Watchers' forbidden teachings had taken root, spreading sin and moral decay across the earth. By sharing these secrets, the Watchers gave humanity control over forces that were meant to remain unknown, and this control came at a terrible cost. Humanity was now on a path of self-destruction, torn apart by warfare, sorcery, and pride gods. Enlil and Enki laws, which were meant to guide and protect, were disregarded, and the delicate balance between heaven and earth was shattered. But what was it about these teachings that God deemed so dangerous? Why did God hidden this knowledge? But why would God, who created all things, strict certain knowledge from humanity in the Book of Enoch? The forbidden knowledge shared by the fallen angels was far from ordinary wisdom. It was a knowledge that gave humanity a false sense of control over nature, destiny, and even each other. God did not intend for us to have this power, because it would inevitably lead to pride, corruption, and ultimately self-destruction. One of the most dangerous teachings was the knowledge of weapon making and warfare, with the skills to forge metals into tools of violence. Humanity was given a pathway to destruction. Before the Watchers, humanity had lived in peace and simplicity, relying on God for guidance and sustenance. But once they possessed the ability to make weapons, they began to turn against one another. This newfound power brought a false sense of security and dominance, leading people to believe they could control life and death. Another forbidden teaching was the art of enchantments, magic, and the manipulation of the natural world. This knowledge tempted humanity to rely on mystical powers instead of trusting in God. By controlling elements of the unseen world, people became captivated by illusions of power, believing they could bend reality to their will. This knowledge opened the door to sorcery, divination, and contact with dark spiritual forces that were never meant to influence human life. Deuteronomy 18:10 reflects God's warning against these practices. Let no one be found among you who sacrifices their son or daughter in the fire, who practices divination or sorcery. Anyone who does these things is detestable to the Lord. God knew that seeking power through forbidden means would only lead humanity further from Him, entangling us in a world of deception and spiritual danger. Finally, the Watchers shared secrets of astrology and the understanding of celestial bodies, teaching humanity how to read the stars. An attempt to control their own destinies while studying creation can reveal God's wonders. Using the stars to predict and manipulate outcomes was a distortion of God's intent. It replaced trust in God with an illusion of control over fate. Humanity began to place faith in cosmic forces rather than in the Creator himself. In Isaiah 47, 13 to 14, God rebukes those who turn to the stars for guidance, saying, "Let your astrologers come forward." Those stargazers who make predictions month by month, let them save you from what is coming upon you. They cannot even save themselves. The knowledge shared by the Watchers encouraged humanity to seek self-reliance rather than divine guidance, leading to a spiritual pride that distanced them from God's wisdom and love in God's wisdom. He understood that certain knowledge would only bring harm, if not accompanied by the maturity and spiritual insight to handle it. The Watchers' forbidden teachings offered power without responsibility, knowledge without wisdom and influence, without humility. This knowledge was kept from humanity, not as a restriction but as a protection. God's desire was for humanity to rely on him and to find fulfillment in his guidance and love, not in the false security offered by forbidden power, but the damage was done. Humanity had tasted power that corrupted and divided, placing them on a path of self-destruction. The hidden knowledge. Why did God forbid this knowledge? Imparted by the Watchers did not merely expand human understanding, it fundamentally altered the way humanity interacted with each other and with creation. This knowledge acted like a poison, seeping into every part of society, corrupting hearts and igniting desires for power, domination and control, instead of using wisdom to build harmony. Humanity used forbidden knowledge to tear itself apart. One of the most devastating effects of this knowledge was the rise of unending violence once humans learned the art of weapon-making. They no longer saw each other as brothers and sisters, but as enemies and rivals armed with swords, shields and tools of war. Individuals and tribes became consumed by the desire to conquer and control the Book of Enoch details how bloodshed spread as violence escalated, leading to a world where peace became a distant memory in Genesis 61 to 12. We see a reflection of this devastation. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight and was full of violence. God saw how corrupt the earth had become. For all the people on earth had corrupted their ways, humanity had turned the knowledge of creation into tools of destruction, and the earth itself suffered as a result. But the impact of forbidden knowledge went beyond physical violence. The teachings of magic and enchantments introduced humanity to the allure of supernatural power. People became obsessed with controlling forces they did not fully understand, leading to widespread deception, manipulation, and spiritual decay. Instead of seeking wisdom and guidance from God, humanity sought answers from dark powers, opening doors to forces that would further distance them from the divine. The Book of Enoch describes how these practices brought deep moral and spiritual corruption. Humanity began to embrace sorcery and divination, trusting in mystical charms and spells to alter reality to their desires. As people became more entrenched in these practices, their sense of humility and dependence on God faded. Replaced by pride and self-interest, they became entrapped in a web of spiritual darkness that clouded their understanding and led them further away from God's light. The knowledge of astrology, another teaching shared by the Watchers, gave humanity the illusion that they could control their destinies by reading the stars. Instead of placing their faith in God's plan, people began to rely on the movements of celestial bodies, placing fate in the hands of the cosmos rather than in the Creator. This shift led to a culture of fatalism where people believed they could manipulate their own futures, ignoring God's guidance and authority. This overconfidence in human control led to a world marked by arrogance and pride, a world where people believed they could govern their own lives without God. Proverbs 16:18 warns us, "Pride goes before destruction, a hay spirit before a fall in their attempt to take control." Humanity had unwittingly placed themselves on a path towards self-destruction. Blind to the wisdom and protection that God's commandments offered, this corrupted knowledge created a world spiraling into darkness. A world where violence, deception, and arrogance flourished. The Book of Enoch paints a vivid picture of how this forbidden knowledge did not bring enlightenment but led to moral decay and societal collapse. Humanity, lost in a maze of power and pride, began to walk further and further away from God, their Creator and source of true wisdom. But God would not allow this descent to continue unchecked as humanity spiraled further. Divine judgment. The Great Flood, as a cleansing act into chaos, corruption and violence under the influence of forbidden knowledge, God saw that the only way to restore balance was through a divine act of cleansing according to the Book of Enoch. God's heart was deeply grieved by the condition of humanity who had become entangled in wickedness and rebellion, a far cry from the innocence in which they were created. The world was overrun with violent spiritual corruption and pride, a direct consequence of the forbidden knowledge shared by the fallen angels. In Genesis 6:5-6, we read about God's sorrow. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil. All the time, the Lord regretted that he had made human beings on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. This verse reflects the depth of the corruption, a world that had lost its way, driven by powers it could not control, and knowledge it could not bear. God's response was both decisive and compassionate. A judgment that sought not only to punish, but to purify. He decreed the Great Flood, an event that would cleanse the earth of its corruption and reset humanity on a path of innocence and dependence on him. But the Book of Enoch adds a layer to this story, explaining that God's judgment was directed not only at humanity, but also at the fallen angels who had caused this descent into darkness in the Book of Enoch. God sends the archangels Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel to carry out this divine judgment. Each of these archangels had a specific role in managing the consequences of the Watchers' actions. For instance, the Archangel Michael was tasked with binding the fallen angels in chains, condemning them to an abyss where they would await the final judgment. This act served as both a punishment for the Watchers' rebellion and a containment of the evil they had unleashed on the world. Jude 6 echoes this fate of the fallen angels and the angels who did not keep their positions of authority, but abandoned their proper dwelling. These he has kept in darkness, bound with everlasting chains for judgment on the great day. Through this divine intervention, God took steps to contain the spiritual corruption that had spread across the earth, ensuring that the influence of the Watchers would not persist indefinitely. The Great Flood was more than an act of destruction. It was a divine reset, an opportunity for humanity to return into a state of purity and reliance on God in preserving Noah and his family. God demonstrated his commitment to a righteous remnant, ensuring that humanity would survive, but without the influence of the forbidden knowledge that had led to its downfall. Genesis 6:9 describes Noah as a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, a testament to the purity God sought to restore on earth through the flood. God not only cleansed the physical world, but also re-established the boundaries between the spiritual and earthly realms. Boundaries that the Watchers had violated. This reset would allow humanity to start anew, free from the corrupting knowledge that had nearly led to its ruin. The Great Flood serves as a reminder that while God's judgment is just, his mercy endures through this act. He preserved a remnant of humanity, and lessons from the forbidden knowledge of the Watchers set a course for redemption. The story of the Watchers and the forbidden knowledge they shared is more than an ancient tale. It's a timeless warning that echoes across generations. In the Book of Enoch, the fall of the Watchers and the subsequent corruption of humanity serve as a powerful reminder of the dangers of pride, unchecked ambition, and the allure of knowledge that was never meant to be ours. These lessons are not bound to a specific time. They resonate as much today as they did in the days of Noah. The forbidden knowledge imparted by the Watchers, technology, warfare, enchantments, and the power to manipulate nature may seem like a relic of the ancient world, but humanity still faces similar temptations, driven by a desire to control, to dominate, and to place faith in our own understanding rather than in God. The Bible offers us a clear message in Proverbs 35:6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight. This call to trust in God's wisdom rather than our own has never been more relevant. The Watcher's story reminds us that there are boundaries we're not meant to cross, not because God seeks to withhold, but because he seeks to protect the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake, especially when it involves manipulating or controlling the natural and spiritual realms, leads to an erosion of humility and reverence for the Creator. Humanity is left vulnerable, unable to see the consequences of wielding power without wisdom or responsibility. the imprisonment of the Watchers as described in the Book of Enoch and echoed in Jude 1. 6 shows that even beings of immense power are accountable to God's order. Their rebellion and its devastating impact on humanity serve as a lasting testimony of God's justice and the limits He places for our protection. When we step outside of God's design, we expose ourselves to spiritual and moral dangers that can corrupt both our souls and our societies today. The legacy of the Watchers urges us to reflect on our relationship with knowledge, power, and faith. As we continue to seek advancement and understanding, we are reminded of the importance of aligning our pursuits with God's will. The story of the Watchers stands as a warning, cautioning us to pursue wisdom over pride, humility over ambition, and trust in God over self-reliance in Matthew 11:25. Jesus praises God, saying, "I thank you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you have hidden these things from the wise and learned and revealed them to little children." This verse reminds us that true wisdom is often found in childlike trust and humility before God, not in the relentless pursuit of hidden powers or control over creation. And we close this journey through the Book of Enoch. Let us take to heart the lessons of the Watchers and the forbidden knowledge they shared. Their story teaches us that God's boundaries are set not to limit us, but to protect us and draw us closer to Him. May we choose to walk in faith, recognizing that true wisdom comes not from hidden knowledge, but from a relationship with our Creator. The Book of Enoch describes the Watchers, angels who disobeyed God by mating with human women and teaching forbidden knowledge. These actions resulted in the birth of the Nephilim, giants that caused violence and destruction on earth. God punished the Watchers by confining them to Tartarus and destroying their offspring, the Nephilim, through a flood. The article contrasts the Watchers' actions with the Archangel's teachings to Enoch, highlighting the Watchers' corrupting influence. The Book of Enoch, while not canonical, provides insight into Jewish beliefs during the Second Temple period. The Book of Enoch tells the story of 200 Watchers, or angels, sent to watch over humanity. These Watchers conspired to commit sins by taking human women as wives and having children with them. They also taught humans many forbidden skills relating to the different arts and sciences. God condemned these fallen angels for their actions and assigned archangels to confine them to Tartarus until their final judgment. Where does the Book of Enoch come from? What does it say about the Watchers and their crimes? And how does Enoch's account relate to the rest of the biblical canon? Where is the Book of Enoch in the Bible? The Book of Enoch does not appear in the Bible, but is an ancient Jewish religious text credited to Enoch, 7th from Adam, the father of Methuselah and the great-grandfather of Noah. However, it was probably composed between 300 and 100 BCE. While it was considered an important religious text in ancient times, it is no longer considered canonical scripture by the majority of Jews and Christians. Nevertheless, the authors of the New Testament were familiar with Enoch and cited the work. Parts of the Book of Enoch were preserved among the Dead Sea Scrolls in the Qumran caves. Some Greek translations also survive. The Book of Enoch contains the Book of the Watchers, which describes the Watchers sent to oversee mankind, their betrayal of their mission, and their ultimate fall. It also contains the Book of Parables of Enoch, which explores divine judgment, the fate of the righteous and unrighteous, and the role of the Messiah. The astronomical book contains descriptions of the movement of heavenly bodies and knowledge revealed to Enoch on his trip to heaven with the Archangel Uriel. The Book of Dream Visions contains a vision of the history of Israel, potentially as far as the Maccabean revolt of the 2nd century BCE. Finally, the Epistle of Enoch contains a variety of information, including exhortations to Methuselah on how to live righteously, the birth of Noah, and the fates of the righteous versus sinners. Following the sins of the Watchers, God tasked the archangels to deal with the rebellious fallen angels. He also instructed the archangels to show Enoch, the main character in the Book of Enoch, what would happen to the Watchers and their offspring. In the process, different archangels show Enoch the workings of creation, especially that of the heavenly bodies and how they impact man. It is this encounter with the archangels that the Book of Enoch describes. At first glance, the knowledge the Watchers imparted to humans does not seem that different from what the Archangels shared with Enoch. Furthermore, the knowledge that the Watchers shared with humans is considered science by many readers today. It is the knowledge that falls into various fields of science and art. So, were the actions of the Watchers virtuous and in service of humanity, or were these angels instigators of violence? The Watchers descended to earth in the days of Jared, the father of Enoch. Jared was of the 6th generation from Adam. The Watchers conspired to take wives and have children with human women, instead of watching over humanity as they were supposed to do. They also taught humans various sciences and skills. 1 Enoch, the Watchers 3:2-7. The Watchers' desire for female humans was born from lust. The intermingling of Watchers and human women resulted in the Nephilim. These giants were violent and destructive individuals who had no regard for life. The rebellion of the Watchers resulted in them becoming fallen angels. Some of the Watchers also taught the humans forbidden skills. Azazel, for instance, taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates, and made known to them the metals of the earth and the art of working them, and bracelets and ornaments, and the use of antimony, and the beautifying of the eyelids, and all kinds of costly stones and all colouring tinctures. In modern terms, this is metallurgy and cosmetology. Metallurgy is the art of extracting metals from rock and shaping those metals into various implements and artifacts. Azazel taught humans to shape metal into weapons, ornaments, and bracelets, and how to set precious stones in them. Cosmetology is the professional skill or practice of beautifying the body by applying pigmented powder and accessories. Semjaza, the leader of the 200 Watchers, taught enchantments and root cuttings, while Almaros taught them how to resolve enchantments. Barakihal taught astrology, while Kokabel shared information on the constellations. Ezekiel shared the knowledge of the clouds, Arachiel instructed on the signs of the earth, Shamsiel on the signs of the sun, and Sariel on the course of the moon. This science sounds innocent enough and correlates with many modern practices and fields of study. Some scholars have interpreted the cutting of roots as a reference to the practice of herbal medicine or to agricultural production, and the references to the constellations, the sun, and the moon to the study of astronomy. Some people may consider the Watchers' act of teaching humanity these sciences as virtuous, designed to uplift humanity and increase their knowledge. But was it? The early Christian readers of 1 Enoch, most of whom believed the book to be a valid source for theology, had a very different view of what the Watchers were up to. They understood Semjaza's teaching of enchantments and root cutting as the practice of witchcraft. Irenaeus, for instance, considered the enchantments and root cutting as the discovery of rare substances, love potions, aversions, amours, concupiscence, constraints of love, spells of bewitchment, and all sorcery and idolatry hateful to God. The other teachings on astrology, the heavenly bodies, and the earth gave rise to soothsayers, augurs, magicians, and other forms of practitioners of the dark arts. It was not the science practiced today. Irenaeus, Commodianus, Tertullian, and Clement of Alexandria are among many early church fathers who reflect negatively on the Watchers and their influence on humanity. According to Commodianus, the Watchers were so revered among men that they erected statues to commemorate them once they died. In his understanding, the Watchers were the demons people worshipped and prayed to in his day. Azazel's teaching may, at first glance, seem innocuous, an early form of metallurgy and cosmetology, but the proof is in the pudding, as they say. The Watcher. Azazel is associated with crafting metal objects such as weapons, bracelets, and jewelry with costly stone inserts and the art of using cosmetics. His teachings had a corrupting influence on humanity and led to much fornication, degradation, and violence. The information in the Book of Enoch has parallels with Genesis. Azazel's instructions soon led to industry. Lamech, in the line through Cain, was the 7th generation from Adam and juxtaposes Enoch, a righteous man. Lamech was the first polygamist, taking 2 wives, Ada and Zillah. Ada means ornament, and names in the Old Testament often point to character or nature, implying she may have liked to beautify herself with makeup and accessories like metal bracelets and jewelry with precious stone inserts. The son Lamech had with his other wife Zillah was called Tubal-Cain. which points to him as a character in the likeness of Cain. The Bible describes him as the forger of all instruments of bronze and iron, Genesis 4:22. He likely manufactured both ornaments and weapons at scale. Lamech was a man prone to violence that threatened any challenger with mortal injury, Genesis 4:23-24. His propensity to violence parallels the circumstance described in the Book of Enoch, where men perished, they cried, and their cry went up to heaven. 1 Enoch, the Watchers 3:14. It was the bloodshed among men that caused the archangels to call on God for action, 1 Enoch, the Watchers 4:1. It was, however, not only men who were violent. The offspring of the Watchers and human women, the giants, consumed whatever men gathered. When humans could no longer sustain the giants, they started feeding on humans too. The giants then turned on the animal kingdom and eventually on one another. The Watchers received a severe punishment for leading humanity astray. They would see their offspring, the giants, murdered and destroyed, 1 Enoch, the Watchers 4:25. God denied their supplication for mercy. The destruction of the giants happened in two ways. First, many giants turned on one another, devouring each other's flesh and drank each other's blood, 1 Enoch, the Watchers 3:14. Secondly, those that remained were destroyed in the flood, 1 Enoch, the Book of Noah 1:15-16. The punishment of the Watchers did not end there. God instructed a selection of archangels to bind the Watchers and cast them in an allocated part of the underworld that is called Tartarus. The fallen Watchers were to remain there until their final judgment. Details of the different punishments suffered by the Watchers are included in the texts. For example, God told Raphael to bind Azazel and cast him into an opening in the desert on rough and jagged rocks. His face was covered so that he could see no light, and he was to remain there until the day of judgment, when he would be cast into the fire. This is described as necessary so that all the children of men do not perish as a result of the knowledge shared with them. The Watchers, or fallen angels, shared information regarding the heavenly bodies with humans and were punished for it. The archangels shared information regarding the heavenly bodies with Enoch without punishment for their actions. What were the differences between the two acts? It was not within the purview of the Watchers to provide knowledge to humans. The Book of Enoch states that Azazel taught all unrighteousness on earth and revealed the eternal secrets which were in heaven, which men were striving to learn. Azazel and the other fallen angels were not authorized to share their information with humans. The Watchers' teaching led to unrighteousness, godlessness, and sin. The results of the knowledge the humans acquired from the fallen angels harmed them and caused them to separate from God and become lawless. They started practicing occultism and used magic, potions, and spells on one another to influence and manipulate one another. The depraved interaction between the fallen angels and humans culminated in the birth of the giants. These giants typified the destructive result of the intermingling of the Watchers and humans and eventually resulted in the almost complete destruction of both. The knowledge that the archangels shared with Enoch was a different matter altogether. God authorized the archangels to share their knowledge of heavenly bodies and their motion with Enoch. It was not knowledge that would lead to occult practices, but science that pertained to cycles, seasons, and systems God created and set in place. The sharing of this knowledge brought Enoch and the few faithful people who remained in a closer relationship with God, 1 Enoch, the Watchers 7:68. The Watchers became fallen angels because they were more concerned with their desires than doing what they were appointed to do, watching over humanity. They decided to take wives and have children with the daughters of men, resulting in giants as offspring. They also taught humanity how to make weapons, how to make ornaments, and how to use cosmetics. All of these things harmed humanity and eventually led to their destruction. The Watchers did not have noble intent with the actions they took. On the contrary, they seem to have set themselves on doing what was in their selfish interest. Instead of being watchers, they became abusers. There was nothing virtuous in their deeds, and considering the results of their actions, we should regard them as the villains of this story. Some religious groups advise against reading this book. Why stay away from the Book of Enoch? It was clearly written long after the life of the supposed Enoch by multiple authors over several centuries. It was one of the many religious texts that did not make it into the final canon of the Bible, known as Apocrypha. Scholars also suggest that it contradicts canonical texts. With that said, knowing the period during which it was written, the Book of Enoch provides interesting information about the evolution of Jewish beliefs during the Second Temple period, in the wake of the Maccabean revolt and under the pressure of Hellenization. If you read it, I'm pretty sure you came to the similar conclusions. And so, if you've enjoyed this video, let me know in the comments below what you learned today. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of the Book of Enoch and the mysterious story of the Watchers. If this video gave you insight into the hidden depths of ancient texts, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the Young Elders YouTube channel. We invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. What does this story of hidden knowledge and divine boundaries mean to you? Share this with other people, and as always, don't forget to hit like, subscribe and share this with others. God bless you until next time.